Story time about how my crazy neighbors ate my dog. By the way, this is an anonymous story from a follower. So me and my boyfriend had just bought our first house together. Everyone welcomed us to the new neighborhood, but we didn't have neighbors to the right side of us yet. No one was in the house yet. So about 6 months into us living there, we get our brand new neighbors. So obviously, since we've been there for 6 months, we introduced ourselves to them. So our neighbors were these two grown men. They didn't even have any furniture in their house, so that kind of stood out. We thought later they'd get moving trucks and move in some furniture, but they never did. So me and my boyfriend had a Pomeranian named Chippy. Sometimes we would let our dog go outside to use the restroom, and every time I went outside to get the dog, I noticed our neighbors were just staring at me. So one day I let Chippy go outside to use the restroom, and when I was ready to bring him back in, I couldn't find him anywhere. So I'm looking around, I'm literally looking everywhere, and he is nowhere to be found. So I go back into the house to tell my boyfriend, and then a few minutes later we get a knock on the door. And it's both of our neighbors like, hey, we found your dog in your front yard. Like for part 2. Part 2 story time about how my crazy neighbors ate my dog. By the way, this is an anonymous story. So after our neighbors bring by our dog, we started to get suspicious for sure. Things just weren't adding up at all. So one day a kid across the street saw our dog Chippy and wanted to play with him. So I said, of course, only if you make sure nothing happens. Obviously I didn't think anything would happen. That kid loved our dog. So as the kid is playing with our dog Chippy, the neighbors are looking out of the window watching him. So they come outside of their house and they go, hey, can I play with him? And the boy says, yeah, but you can't let anything happen to him. Then our neighbor goes, oh, of course not. I play with Chippy all the time. The boy then goes, okay, well, I have to go home now. Make sure Chippy gets back to his owner. He says, of course, nothing's going to happen to Chippy. So the boy goes back into his house, and our neighbors bring Chippy inside of their house. So after about an hour or so, I go outside to see what's going on. Chippy is missing yet again. Like for part 3. Part 3 story time about how my neighbors ate my dog. So once I go outside to look for my dog, I notice he's not there and neither was the kid. So I go to the kid's house across the street to see if maybe he brought the dog home. Then he says, no, I gave him to your neighbors. He said he'd give him back to you. My stomach dropped because I do not trust my neighbors. So I go to my neighbor's house and I'm banging on the door and they don't answer. So I go get my boyfriend. Then he comes out and he's banging on the door demanding that they come out. They never answer. So we call the police. Once the police are called, they get there and they bang on the door and then they answer. The police noticed that they had no furniture and the lights were off, so they became suspicious. A second police officer pulls up and he claims that he recognizes them. And he tells me that they're two homeless men. They don't even actually live there. They broke in. As they were looking around in the house, they found Chippy's collar and they also found remains of a dog. Meaning they ate our dog. That explains why they kept watching him. Any charges?